South Bethlehem was very robust. We had a very vibrant shopping center on the south side.
To me, the people of Bethlehem are the people that live on this block. It's a multicultural, multi-ethnic community.
While I was growing up, Bethlehem was a very tight-knit community, but it was more in clusters of nationalities.
Bethlehem Steel, beginning in the late 19th century and through the 20th century, developed into the second largest steelmaker in the world.
Bethlehem was a one-industry town like many other communities. If you didn't have a relative or a family member working at Bethlehem Steel, that was very, very unusual.
And so, in a sense, South Bethlehem is as powerful and moving an example as you could ask for of the way in which industrial America created the opportunity for immigrants to build viable and dynamic communities of their own.
I'm Italian and you're Irish. Normally, in a lot of circumstances, we might not get along, but we both have to make sure this scalding hot beam doesn't shear our fingers off, so we need to work as a team. That attitude ended up at Liberty High School. That attitude ended up on 4th Street. That attitude ended up on Market Street. Like everywhere in the community, people just realized we have to work together. And if we can work together, then we should work together.
Bethlehem Steel fostered a sense of safety. I think it was like Big Daddy, it was the community.
The steel company took good care of my family and I. We all had jobs.
At one point, roughly 50% of the population in the city worked for that company.
I mean, it was just, if you needed a job, you'd go to the steel. Everybody seemed to get hired. It was a lucrative, thriving community.
Was actively involved in building the skyscrapers that you see in New York and Chicago, built structural steel for bridges, like the Golden Gate Bridge. It was involved in munitions for World War I, World War II, basically every war America's been involved in.
When you go to New York and they're tearing down a building, if that beams come from Bethlehem, it says the word Bethlehem on the beam. They stamped the beams with the name of the company, which just so happened to be the name of the town. I think that's really important to people there. There's a huge sense of pride there.
You're talking about a facility that has been the heartbeat of manufacturing in this region for more than 100 years. You're talking about approximately 1,400 employees. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars that are put into the community.
We regret the consequences that this decision will have for many of our valued employees, their families, and their communities.
And with the end of steelmaking, Bethlehem became once again a kind of example of a deep crisis that is characteristic of industrial communities all over the United States. Tens of thousands of people lost their jobs.
Bethlehem Steel was now under and non-existent, so it was difficult for families to find work.
And we thought, oh my gosh, the steel, it's all we knew. It was kind of scary.
There's so much pride in being this steel town, and for that to just be kind of cut out at the knees was very painful for people.
what was going to happen with those properties and that land. It was critically important for us to get it back onto the tax rolls, put it back to productive use.
So obviously there's a big hole and it had to be filled. We needed to basically replace the lost real estate taxes that Bethlehem Steel used to pay. They were the single largest real estate taxpayer in the city.
You know, we had been working on trying to get this site redeveloped for over 20 years, and it's very expensive because it's an old brownfield site with a lot of environmental contamination and just old industrial buildings, and nobody had the financial wherewithal to do that.
You know, they had big plans for all kinds of things, and they kept following through because the amount of capital involved was just huge.
And I think physically the property is brown and gray, and it's a scar. And I think for a lot of people in Bethlehem, that's what that site started to feel like. It was a reminder of, yeah, we were great, but we also failed. And I think that experience emotionally, it was very hard for people.
Because of the way in which the Bethlehem Steel Corporation managed its bankruptcy, thousands of people lost their pensions and health plans for which they had worked for decades.
Over the years, poverty has set in and has progressively gotten worse. And with poverty, it has nothing to do with the culture, it's just poverty.
When Pennsylvania legalized casino gambling, that seemed to open up another opportunity for a very wealthy gambling corporation to fill that need.
Never did I think gambling was going to become part of our, redevelopment plan.
Because of the Lehigh Valley's proximity to New Jersey and New York and major metropolitan centers, as well as its interstate access to those populations, it was always seen as a shoo-in for a casino license. And the question was that casino going to be in Allentown to Bethlehem's west, or would it be in Bethlehem, where there was all this empty industrial land from the Bethlehem Steel Corporation?
I needed Bethlehem also and the people here to have enough faith in who we were as a community that if we didn't get it, we were going to be fine. And if we get it, we're going to be fine. In essence, we're not going to let this casino define who we are. We're not going to become just a casino town.
There were a series of public meetings that were held as part of the rezoning process. A lot of the community came out because the community was very divided on this issue.
Pretty much everyone in Bethlehem had an opinion about gaming or gambling. And there are pretty much two large groups. One, pro-gaming. Gaming is going to be the economic engine that helps us revitalize the Bethlehem Steel site. And anti-gambling, gambling being I would say it ranged from a sin to just something we don't want in our town.
My initial reaction when I heard that a casino was coming to Bethlehem was, no way, I don't want it, I don't like it, there goes our sweet little community, no.
Anytime there's gambling, there's going to be some issues.
It was just really frightening, the thought of what happened in Atlantic City and the community, the neighborhoods surrounding the casino area. So it was something that I really didn't want to see happening in my neighborhood.
A lot of concern on both sides. I think the people that were against gambling felt very strongly that their cause was right and just, and the people that felt that gaming was an economic engine in a city that needed an economic engine felt equally as passionate.
Bethlehem is the only place where one can put a casino and have it actually assist in the preservation of a vital and important piece of American and
I do not think this is a miracle cure to jumpstart the economy, and we must consider the long-term consequences.
There was a lot of passion around it. I get it. I'm glad there was that passion. I think it was important for us as a community to let those voices be heard, both for and against.
People would bring up very personal things like, my great-grandfather worked at that steel plant and he'd be rolling over in his grave if he knew what they were going to do to it. At the same time, people would say, my great-grandfather worked at that steel site and he knows that we need jobs.
I feel that the slot parlor would be beneficial to our city because the tax revenue it would provide.
As I understand, our city is in debt for $380 million.
I knew it was really important to bring somebody that had deep pockets in order to develop the former Bethlehem Steel property and to bring a lot of good jobs
it would be the only way that we could be able to move the South Side forward again and to keep it operating.
I too believe we desperately need it, both for jobs and to preserve our world-class historical heritage.
Bethlehem residents feel very strongly when there is going to be a change that they should show up and voice their opinion. It's John Callahan tells this joke that when there's a change made in the city of Allentown and people don't like it, they move to Whitehall. And when there's a change made in the city of Bethlehem, people don't like it, they show up to a meeting. But this site, this Bethlehem Steel site, is so important to everyone that lives here that even though it was just located on the south side, it was something that affected everyone. So I think that brought out a much deeper level of passion and more debate than any other change would have.
We felt like it was important to preserve the history, and there were a lot of people who felt that way as well, because we had been struggling with redevelopment there for 10 years. And despite the Bethlehem Steel Corporation's best efforts, we were struggling with redevelopment.
They have a real plan, a feasible plan, and a plan to continue the renaissance of South Bethlehem and the Bethlehem plant.
What Bethlehem was, how everybody perceived the city, with its religious roots, its religious founding, the fact that people felt it was introducing something like gaming was almost anathema to the community's soul.
The Moravian community was absolutely against it on religious grounds. There were many of the churches were against it on religious grounds. Some of my family was against it on religious grounds as well and didn't talk to me for a couple of years.
There was a moment when, in the course of these hearings, when my honors English teacher from 11th grade came. She kind of turned and she was like standing above me and she gave me like this. She pointed down at me and said, "And you, if I would have known that you were going to, be supportive of a casino coming to Bethlehem, I never would have supported you." And it's for that moment, I was back in 11th grade being scolded for not having like a paper in on time. But it was definitely something that made me, step back for just a moment and say, is this really the right direction for the city?
A lot of the negatives of gambling people thought were a poor balance to the Christmas City vibe of the city.
I have lived in Bethlehem for 31 years. The city of Bethlehem does not need slots to create a new identity. We have our own unique identity now.
I have lived in Bethlehem for over 50 years. I love our community and do not want it to become a gambling town.
Ask our elected officials to invest in our people and not a corporation.
It would hire local labor. Union jobs would basically build the site.
Politicians want to create jobs, they want to create taxes, and a casino can promise those, at least in the short term.
These powerful corporate, gambling interests, they position themselves in communities and in states around the country that are financially desperate. Or you've been in a recession for the last several years, or you lost your industrial core. Guess what? We're your answer.
Large presence of legal gambling in the community sends a persistent message to our children. Wealth comes biggest and best through the spin of the wheel, not through formal education and hard work. Luck is the answer, not labor. Is there a more direct way to undermine the work ethic with our children than through this message?
This, what I call sort of a predator beast in our community, the most vulnerable, the poorest, the least mentally competent people in our community. They were the frequent gamblers.
A quick fix is not the answer. That concerned us as a community.
I am strongly against slots coming to Bethlehem, PA, as I am an addiction counselor, so I know firsthand that it's almost impossible to cure addictions to gambling. Addictive gambling is a hard psychological compulsion, which does not let go of its victims. And even when it appears to be overcome, the trust between marital partners is hard or impossible to restore.
Nobody wants to tell the story, well, the best we could do to replace high-skilled jobs producing a necessary part of American infrastructure was to produce slot machines where people will lose their paycheck.
This industry produces some entertainment, I suppose, for the moment for people, and some jobs. And the dollar stops there, except the large amount that goes on to the owner, the rich owners of the casino.
How can anyone fall for the hope that our hard-earned money draining into a gambling system will generate wealth? Only the select few will benefit at the cost of the industrious many who work hard for their money.
During the casino wars, as my wife and I used to call them, it was really terrible, and I took a heck of a beating.
I'll never forget one of the folks who talked at Brockle. I remember her vividly shouting, "This is going to bring mass amounts of prostitution and crime to the South Side that will change this whole town."
Our city does not need outsiders to create a monstrosity in the Christmas city, which will bring undesirable crime, traffic, and the opportunity for low-income families to lose their life savings to out-of-towners who have no prior connection to Bethlehem.
And in fact, the primary casino development model specifically positions casinos near highway interchanges so that easy in and out access can happen.
The cars and the buses will come, but the rest of the city will just watch them go by. So, who are the real losers?
Part of what my job was to I guess, temper expectations on either side. It was, it wasn't going to be our savior, and it wasn't going to be the demise of Bethlehem either. It was going to be a part of the overall economic future and plan we had for the community.
I feel like I was part of history, making sure my voice, the voice of the community, was heard in the process.
Because these meetings would sometimes go till 2, 3 in the morning, Allentown, which was sort of having that same dialogue or discussion, would have maybe 5 or 6 people show up in favor of it, and the meetings were over rather quickly. I'd much rather be the mayor of a city where 500 people show up at a meeting than 5, because that shows that people care and they've got a lot of passion about their city.
I think it hurt people in Bethlehem to see that site rotting. I think it emotionally hurt them, which was something that I didn't realize until I was actually at the public meeting and heard all that passion come out, how real the feelings were. So I think there was a lot of hurt and frustration.
When we polled the question of should gaming come to Bethlehem, should it be something that should be endorsed and accepted, it was basically 50-50. But then when you introduce the other question, but if gaming could help preserve the blast furnaces, which were beyond the overwrought term of iconic, they are iconic, but they're part of the city skyline. When you think of Bethlehem, you think of those blast furnaces, and that kind of turned the tide, I think, for people.
And in a way, it really was kind of a David and Goliath type of battle. And in the end, it was those resources that Las Vegas Sands had to push for the license that won out. And it's really those resources that also made the case in terms of we can create thousands of jobs, we can create millions of dollars in tax revenue to the community from land that had been sitting idle for almost a decade.
When we got the announcement that it was happening, I actually cried. I was very upset. I knew that if it was coming to Bethlehem, it was going to be in the South Side, which is where I live. I was afraid. I was very scared that we were going to have another like this city here.
The future of South Side of Bethlehem, and Bethlehem itself, but was very much altered in that very moment that we got the license.
A lot of people, once the decision was made, once that license was issued to the Sands, said, well, now I have to be more involved because I need to make sure that all these promises that the Sands just made, that Sands Bethworks just made, are going to be upheld.
What they did was get Las Vegas Sands Corporation on board. Together, they created a master plan for the country's largest brownfield, one that would incorporate 23 of the 36 original Bethlehem steel structures. The area is now known as Sands Bethworks.
When you're on a brownfield site where there's been damage to the earth, it's not easy to just dig straight down and start to put a building up.
The original Bethlehem Steel master plan was essentially to take that site and turn it into a parking lot. That was the ore yard, probably one of the more compromised, dirtiest portions of the brownfield. That was the cheapest and simplest way to remediate what was one of the most compromised portions of the site. What we convinced Sands to do was to consider that site for the casino, and that's what they did. They invested $800 million, a little over $800 million in the development of the casino, and probably 10 or 12% of it was just site prep, site remediation, just getting it ready for the development.
One of the largest brownfield sites in the country, once home to one of the largest steel producers in the country, has officially been transformed. Using old parts from the steel factory, the Blue Man Group celebrated the official opening of the Sands Casino Resort in Bethlehem.
The mill that shaped the nation will become the mill that reshapes this community, this region, and in some respects, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
To honor the heritage of the property, a chain cutting seemed more appropriate than a ribbon cutting.
When they built the casino, we really emphasized the point of trying to have a blend of new and incorporate some aspects of the steel company, some of the coloring, some of the brick building, and they did.
The design of the casino was important to the community. It fit into the community, you know, it blended in with our heritage.
Bethlehem Steel was an integral part of my life, which is the main reason that I wanted to be actively involved in this project.
I think it would be a mistake to come to a site like where Bethlehem Steel was and what it meant to the country for all those years, and then also to what it meant to the greater Lehigh Valley and also Pennsylvania for that matter, and not pay homage to it.
You can drive by there on any given day and almost not know that it's there, but if you drove in and saw it, there's probably 50,000 people in there, but you almost never know it.
We have a lot of people who actually worked at Bethlehem Steel come in and say it's great how we retrofitted a building to make it a casino, even though it's a completely new building. So that actually kind of shows us that we did the right thing and that kind of carried through.
Because of my fear, my concerns, I just became actively engaged in the process. You know, and I'm really glad I did because I changed my mind totally. The agreement with the Sands and the city included we are going to make sure that there are people from the Lehigh Valley and from Bethlehem especially working in the casino.
These days, for job seekers, finding employment is like a game of chance.
There's not a lot of employment around the valley anymore.
I need benefits and I need a full-time job.
Sands says jobs is what it has.
We helped 500 people get jobs, and at that time, if you remember, that's when the economy was in the tank. There were no jobs.
92% of our employees live in the state of Pennsylvania, and 82% of them live in the Lehigh Valley.
Paying jobs that would allow them to take care of the basic needs of their families made it possible for those families to at least be stable.
The local steelworkers union rallied around the Sands earlier this week to thank them for hiring so many of their own.
The bottom line is, hey, get people working.
I remember 2 individuals in the community, and they got for the first time in their life, working on a job that gave them their 401k. And just going through that and finishing it up and saying, so now you can have health insurance, you know, and just seeing how grateful they are for having this opportunity to have a job right in their community, very close to home, and now having benefits they never had before.
So needless to say, when they opened, I was knocking on their door to say, you know, there is a need. Here is a community right in your backyard that can utilize assistance. The casinos have now taken on our school as a close partner through busing to give our children opportunities to take trips. So the collaboration of the educational system and the Sands really became tight. I never imagined it could work so well and make such a difference in our community, but it has.
After Bethlehem Steel closed, there was a major dip in terms of tax revenues coming into Bethlehem. And then as the site has been redeveloped, spearheaded by the casino, that trajectory has been up.
The Bethlehem Steel was a very large contributor to the municipal budget in the city. So when that went away, that created a large vacuum. And we operated for many years in difficult times. So the casino really provided a necessary economic boost to the city.
So Pennsylvania, for example, has one of the highest tax rates on slot machine revenue in the country, and among states has the highest revenue from casinos.
Instead of having zero taxes generated where the casino sits, it's almost $16 million a year in taxes. We use that money to basically invest in infrastructure. We invested in the Beth Works site in the form of steel stacks. And the creation of this arts and cultural campus to essentially balance off what was happening at the Sands with the casino.
The casino is an important bridge, and it's important to us basically because without them, we wouldn't have Arts Quest.
Steel stacks, the Levitt concerts, the movie theater, I like that they do that, yes. And would that have happened without the Sands? Probably not. And I hadn't thought of that before. I'm not sure what would have been done to the area. And maybe it would have gone into just ruin.
If it weren't for the casino, you know, I pretty much believe that that entire area where the steel was would still be a dormant area that would, you know, not contributing at all to our community.
I think that it really has created a positive snowball effect in the entire communities. The South Side is now the place that you want to be.
There's been a dramatic transformation into the feel of the city, and there's so much more that's available now and things to do and places to go.
There was a time when I was fearful my children would never come back here from college because there really wasn't much for them to come back to. And I think over the last 15 years, we've all worked very hard to change that. So there are jobs and there is a future here in Bethlehem.
When I first moved here, that the South Side, you know, after having the steel closed for so long, it was really like in the dark. And the Sands came on. There was a lot of commotion, there was a lot of construction, there was a lot of noise, but now we have light, and it's like literally, you know, it lit up the South Side.
You're starting to see an awful lot more of development going on the South Side right now, and I would like to think that a large part of that is because of the excitement around what we're doing here.
Maintaining this is something that I hope for years to come it will sustain. The thought of this going away one day is frightening to me because it will take us back many years.
Well, when gambling was legalized here in 1976, it injected new life into the boardwalk empire. But economists said that casino saturation would creep into this market. And it looks like those warnings are becoming a reality.
A lot of people have questioned the sustainability of this casino development model, whether it can last long term or just provide jobs and taxes in the short term.
States all over the United States are now vying to legalize casinos in the race to try to use this short-term fix.
You're getting to the point now, especially on the East Coast, where almost every major state has some form of legalized gaming in their market, and that's really kind of changed the game.
Casino gambling is now available in 4 out of 5 states, a dramatic increase from just a few decades ago. This rapid growth is starting to squeeze some state budgets as casinos try to lure gamblers away from one another, cutting into tax revenues. But as Mark Albert found, that's not stopping some developers from rolling the dice.
All these communities, most financial experts agree, are going to start cannibalizing each other in terms of attracting from the same pool of gamblers.
As that competition ramps up, the total number of gambling dollars is getting spread thinner and thinner and thinner.
The state of Pennsylvania is greedy, and I think they're hurting. They hurt the Sands, then Bethlehem, more than they helped. You can flood the market and you can kill it.
You don't know 3 to 5 years you'll probably have casinos in New York City, so you need to bring new customers here.
At least initially there's some type of novelty effect in the short run, and so those impacts that you see early on maybe start to go away.
At the end of the day, the people of Bethlehem, the state of Pennsylvania, they may have seen an infusion of money in the short term, but that's money that has been taken out of everyday, the savings and the assets of everyday folks. So in the long term, whether you gamble or not, you have a lower standard of living in the greater Bethlehem area because of the introduction of this massive, what is a wealth vacuum at the Sands Casino.
Some are concerned that the 5 million people the Sands estimates will be coming to gamble each year will do just that and go home.
In almost every community where a casino has promised that its gamblers will end up spending money outside of the casino, whether at restaurants, at museums, or at other community facilities, that never quite lives up to expectations.
It is more and more an all-inclusive bubble that people come and they stay there and they leave. They come on tour buses and they stay there and they leave. They come on the last bus from New York City that arrives here at 1 a.m. and they stay here they stay in that complex for the night and leave at 7 in the morning.
After 10 years, the profit curve of the Sands is already beginning to decline, and whether in another decade this casino can be profitable in anything like the way it is now, when there are competitor casinos in both New Jersey and New York, remains to be seen.
We don't want to be a situation like Atlantic City where they closed 4 or 5 casinos in 1 year. In the case of Bethlehem and Lehigh Valley, it would have widespread impacts for Allentown, Easton, and the county if the casino was not here anymore.
I think a lot of the proposals for casino development include promises of ancillary development, meaning development beyond the casino that never actually happens. If some of that did happen, and if some of that catered not just to gamblers, that could really make an impact on a community. A casino itself, though, is not going to be a long-term solution.
You can't just sort of balance the budget on the backs of the casinos.
You want a community to grow because it only does one of two things. Either community grows or community dies, and you don't want the alternatives.
As the community leaders in Bethlehem always hoped from the beginning, it's not the casino development itself that's going to improve the community, it's what can be leveraged from having the casino there that's going to be of most benefit. And in Bethlehem, that's going to mean additional development of the steel site. It's going to mean additional investment in housing in South Bethlehem, for example. It's not just about opening a casino, rolling the dice, and hoping everything's going to be okay. By Las Vegas Sands throwing a few $1,000s to a local nonprofit to keep them afloat, that's a positive development for the nonprofit. On the other hand, when you think about the profits, the billions of dollars in profits that the corporation is making, it's a drop in the bucket.
I think they do some because everybody want to look good, but I don't think they do enough. They can do more. Don't give me once a year a part of the shoes and clothes for Christmas. I don't need that. I need something to can raise a good kids in the good community like this, in the South Side.
But they should be giving more. I think that I don't think everybody, nonprofits, especially in the community or organizations that could benefit from the money, really know as I do, because I was always asking and in their face trying to figure out how do I get your money. So maybe they should have a different structure so they can educate the community better in terms of the nonprofits and such that could benefit from money.
For us, this is a huge investment, right? This is a $1 billion practically capital investment over there. For Sands Corporate, that's pocket change. And consequently, from the corporate end, this whole area has not developed the way we expected it to.
Even the mall they built, that's not for the people, for the community. They don't have the store like the people around here they can go and buy. So you can tell that's what's not for us. That's for the people that come from someplace else. They go and gamble and they can go to that mall. That's high standard mall. You don't be a high standard mall in a place like this. Be something for the community too.
When they talk about feasibility, that's not feasible. We don't, I'm like, why don't you do affordable housing at least, you know, half of it. Oh, that's not feasible. Well, feasible to them, I'm sure it's not like the same feasible that I think of, you know. So the money-making machine is on, and that's all they think about.
I don't think they care. Why are you going to care? You make your money, so you don't care what's going on in the neighborhood. You don't care. I care because I live here. I raise my kids here. But it's about money. It's about money. They're making good money. People come from everywhere to play in the casino. It's close to New York. It's close to New Jersey. They get what they want.
Sands Bethlehem is about 3.5% of Las Vegas Sands. It was Las Vegas Sands' first real foray into an American market outside of Las Vegas.
Today, most of Las Vegas Sands' corporate profits come from Macau and Singapore, which are the biggest gambling markets in the world, far larger than Las Vegas. The Bethlehem casino has fit less and less into this global portfolio. It's much smaller. It's often not mentioned at all on their earnings calls. And although it's very profitable for the corporation, a lot of outside observers saw early on that it might not always fit within their long-term plans.
They were very open to more of a partnership with the city, and they have since moved away from that and have pretty much said to the city, kind of talk to the hand, and not really allowed for the kind of input or the level of input, certainly, that we had initially hoped would continue.
I think they lost interest in Bethlehem, and obviously they lost it enough to want to sell the casino. But I think they lost interest in Bethlehem, and I think the Bethlehem model. And once they did that, I think that between their investment in Las Vegas and obviously their investments in the Far East, Bethlehem became not just an outlier, but became almost this anomaly. I think if you went around the site now and evaluated some of the significant historic structures there, they're probably all going to be in various stages of disrepair.
One of the reasons they got the license in the first place was a commitment that they made to develop this whole property. And Sands, the corporations, they seem to lose interest in that aspect of the partnership, basically. You know, we're sitting here 10, 15 years later, and we still have rusty buildings and fences up, when by now we really thought this would be a thriving community.
At some point, these buildings aren't going to last forever, and you do run the risk of sort of demolition by neglect.
I think a lot of people have been disappointed that those plans for ancillary development have taken a lot longer to materialize than they had thought. So for instance, there's a huge industrial building called the No. 2 Machine Shop.
At one time, it was the largest industrial building under roof in the world. It's about a 300,000 plus square foot building. It's in really bad shape.
Las Vegas Sands has been very slow to move forward with any plans on that, in part because it turned out they've always been looking for maybe another buyer to take on a project of that scale.
Bethlehem Sands Casino has been sold for a hefty price tag.
Wind Creek Hospitality, which is run by an American Indian tribe from Alabama, has agreed to purchase the casino for $1.3 billion.
From what I understand, they are a very community-based operation. So my hope is that nothing will change. If anything, we will be able to enhance the work that we do as a partner with them.
And that will require from me in my mind to be part of that too, to make sure that everything stays as it is, or, you know, even better, who knows.
And what Sands has done, and I'm not knocking it at all, they have done some great things for Bethlehem, but then they stopped doing great things. And I think our frustrations mounted a bit, and hopefully the new owners will have an opportunity to kind of pick up the ball where Sands dropped it, I think.
This will be their flagship operation instead of, you know, just a small thing in some backwater little town in Pennsylvania. This will be their primary, their biggest property. So I hope they want to develop the properties around that.
I just hope to continue the development of the site and to preserve the historic integrity of the site, to tell the story of steel so that we remember where we came from.
But I really hope that the community see this as an opportunity to be part of and to make history along with what's going to happen, so that we can hold them accountable. I think that's just the big part of the picture, hold them accountable to our community.
I believe Bethlehem is in as good shape as it is today precisely because ordinary people have been so active, so persistent, so vocal in their efforts to protect their community and to shape the development of the casino enterprise in ways that would minimize the damage that it caused.
And unlike a lot of towns where the big industry left, we thrive. Bethlehem is thriving. It didn't go bankrupt. People didn't leave in droves. We are a thriving community.
But we're resilient, and I think we find ways to sort of reinvent ourselves.
One of Bethlehem's strengths is that they've been able to kind of change and not leave behind what made the city special or its history, but sort of build upon it.
I think there is a feeling that the casino came here and it didn't destroy us. And there's a lot of pride behind that because it's kind of like this, Bethlehem's tough enough to not only come back from the loss of its main industry, but also to assimilate around another huge industry without becoming Las Vegas or without becoming Atlantic City. I believe there's a lot of pride around that.